So we're holding Hilchos Taaruvot, Kuf Hey. Quick review of some of the concepts. At the very beginning of Siman Kuf Hey, we're talking about various forms of contact other than Taaruvos. Various degrees of heat, Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, and we discussed Iroi as well. We know what Bishul is. We know that Bishul poses a problem not only for Basar b'Chalav, but anywhere because of Tam. And even though we did remove the Isser, we were able to identify the Isser. We removed it. Still, there can be leftovers. There can be Tam. And once an Isser falls into Heter, or Heter falls into Isser, it's almost irreversible if it's hot. There's a question in the Poskim of how long does it have to be. In the past we discussed that if it was not hot yet, even though it was on the fire, it's not a problem. That's a given. But the question is, what happens if it was hot, boiling hot, but you removed it right away? Would that make a difference? That we haven't discussed yet. And that appears to be a machlokes of poskim. And there's some that want to learn out from Basar b'Chalav. There appears to be an indication that if something is not there long enough, or if it's not exactly mixed with everything, a piece of it is sticking out. Remember the case where near or lo near, the piece that is sticking out in the Basar b'Chalav. Sure. You know, we see this that somehow the near would make a difference. So if it's not near, the piece.
Say if we did mix it.
Right. You didn't stir it, so you don't include in the bitul, the shear, the entire piece, because it's not spread out evenly yet. Near allows for the spreading of the Isser evenly. Anyway, so there is I think an Akron that wanted to use that as a raya, that therefore if something was not there long enough, quickly you removed it, that maybe it does not become Asr. Not everybody holds like that. For the most part, I think the poskim are all in agreement that, we're not mechalek. The moment something falls in and it's boiling hot, it immediately became Asr. And or heter that fell into Isser, it immediately became Asr, if it's hot. But there is a chiluk, one small chiluk, that there appears to be some agreement, that if it's not a liquid, if we're not talking about a liquid, we're talking about two solids that came in contact with each other early, and you immediately remove them, that wouldn't be as much of a problem. Maybe you need a klipa, you would need a dach, if anything, but it would not Asr, because as we will see in the Ramah in Sif Gimel, things that are sitting next to each other, even though there's no din of tatoa govar, if they're both hot, it's still going to be a problem. One thing sitting on top of another, things that are mixed together, is of course problematic. But things that are sitting next to each other, right? Even if you usually hold tatoa govar, in other words, the one that is in the bottom is stronger than the one that's on top. Here, there's no one in the bottom. They're both equal. They're both the same. So it would make a difference only if there were both of them were hot, as opposed to if one of them is hot and the other one is cold, which we will see in the Ramah. So anyway, we left off that a Kli Sheni, we pass in Kli Sheni is not mefashel, even though there are poskim that hold that it's still a problem. We say that there is a big machlokes concerning Irui, and the maskana is that Irui, even though it's not a real bishul, but it's mevashel kedei klipa. So whether you hold it's bishul or not, but kedei klipa, it always is going to be an issue. And this halachas, of course, apply to Hilchos Shabbos as well as to Hilchos Taaruvos. That which we are mekel, however, in Kli Sheni, that it's not mevashel, whether it was a liquid into a solid, or whether it was a solid into a liquid, or whether it was two liquids, that didn't make a difference in a Kli Sheni. When does it make a difference? If it's only a solid. In other words, if we're dealing with a piece of solid meat, solid potatoes, dover gush, that is no longer in the Kli and is now in a Kli Sheni or in a Kli Shlishi, as the Aruch HaShulchan explains it, maybe even in a Kli Revi, if it's a solid piece does not cool off so quickly as the liquid does. Even though there are those that say just the opposite of that somehow the liquid retains itself better, but for the most part, I have found that most poskim are in agreement with this. Mm-hmm. That which we said about Kli Sheni is with liquids. But A davar gush will continue to be hot.
It takes longer to heat up, it reaches the heat.
Right, it retains the heat after you've transferred it into a kli sheni. And that would be even in a kli shlishi. That's the way the Aruch HaShulchan brings down, and I think everybody is in agreement. Now, why is it that? As you explained, it retains the heat, but with liquid, we say that the dafnos sakeli are the ones that are responsible for cooling off. So every time you transfer liquid into another vessel, it will tend to cool off. So that's just the nature of the way kli sheni works with liquids.
And that is also again another iteration by a good. Because by a liquid, it sure touches the walls of the cold pot, which is getting warmed through the liquid, losing temperature.
But I did point out that, I mean, even though it's not such a big chiluk, but it is important to realize that if you do have a mixture, liquid into solid, solid into liquid, I mean, it makes no difference, then it's still liquid.
Of course.
Okay, we're talking about a solid by itself.
And that by itself is not likely to touch the walls of the pot on all itself.
Exactly, yeah. But anytime you have a mixture of liquid and solids, it retains its din or status of kli sheni, which is interesting. Why the Aruch HaShulchan does say, maybe the Shach too, I don't recall, that if you have a mixture of rice, beans, lentils, a whole, that's not called a gush. That would also qualify as form of liquid or form of something that will not retain, because it's a mixture of things as opposed to being one thing. Yeah, even though it's dry.
But I think here the function of being that it will spread out in the pot, touch each other, and touch the walls of the pot. That now the walls of the pot that is cold will be absorbing heat from the food, for the food will be losing the heat. And since little things like lentils and rice and so on, they all touch each other, so they're transferring heat from one to the other. And the overall temperature of the food will be sinking. Whereas if you have a solid,
just one solid,
that's not touching the walls of the pot,
that's right.
So that solid itself is light.
Yeah, you could say so. Yeah, that makes sense.
It was on the fire.
Yeah. Anyway, so the shach.
So it has a din of kli rishon, the solid.
The solid in itself, yes.
Has a din of kli, even though it happens to be in a second part.
Yeah. Now we did make a distinction between kli rishon, of course, that is ala eish, kli rishon that was removed from the eish.
Oh, we did make it.
Yeah, that's what the mechaber is speaking about. It's chom shel kli rishon shayat soledes but mevashel. What's the chiddush that was in Sif base? The chiddush is that even if it's not ala eish.
So it remains. It continues to have the din of kli rishon until it goes below the temperature.
Right. And by klei sheni, by the way, and by irui to an extent, there will be some that will say that the koach, even though the koach of kli sheni is not to be mevashel, it has become weaker. It does have, or it may have, the koach of being mavliya and or maflit. Okay, that's the question, because what happens if you have a kli sheni that is very hot? It's boiling. It's not only yatzoledes, but it's still boiling.
The kli went inside the food.
Whatever. Yeah, the soup. We call it a kli sheni. I mean, the poskim hold it's a kli sheni. The majority of them says it's a kli sheni. It's not mevashel. But there is, if you really get into it, and if we have time, we will maybe another time. A kli sheni may have a different din if it's still boiling. Okay, because the concern was, it's not mevashel, but it does have a koach to be mavliya or be maflit or both. See, sometimes.
So this is a different concern. Legabe hilchos Shabbos.
Right.
Where the whole isser is the cooking.
Right.
So now that it's in a pot called a kli sheni, in other words, the temperature of the pot is kli sheni, because kli sheni is really temperature.
Yes.
So since the temperature of the pot is a kli sheni,
right.
Legabe bishul, this is no longer called bishul.
Yes, exactly.
Shabbos.
Right.
But legabe Taaruvot, where we're concerned with absorptions and emissions.
Exactly.
For that, the heat might still be problematic.
It may be.
The kli sheni, maybe infinitesimal. There may be no real discernible. There's a halachic difference, but there's no difference.
Right. It's just the nature of the kli sheni, the fact, as Elihu was pointing out, with the physics behind it. It will somehow lose some of its strength.
The way we discussed it when we were doing Hilchos Shabbos, the way we discussed it was like this. Kli rishon, the pot itself was on the fire. The pot absorbed heat from it. Anything you put in the pot be heated by the pot, even when the pot is off the fire, due to the heat that it already absorbed. It still has the power to cook it, even when it's off. A pot that was never on the fire now doesn't have the heat absorption from the fire with itself, the heat itself. And so what you put into the pot, this pot will cool food down and not heat it up.
Right.
My own was
yes, very good.
Off the fire and a notable difference in temperature.
In the what? In the food. But the pot.
The pot has an effect on the food.
A cooling effect.
A cooling effect. You're right.
The pot now will be heated up by the food, and the food's temperature will sink as the pot's temperature rises.
Yeah.
But the pot does not have the strict to cook something.
So as Ilan pointed it out, in Hilchos Shabbos it may not be a question, but in Taaruvot it may be.
Right.
It may be. Even though we still hold, the Mechaber is very clear that we don't hold that Kli Sheni is mevashel, but because he brings the Yesh Oimrim, שגם כן אינו מפליט ולא מבליע, ויש אומרים שבמקום מקום הוא מפליט ומבליע, ועוסק דקליפה, one should be חושוב ליזור בדבר לכתחילה. This is not Hilchos Shabbos, this is in Taaruvot.
Right.
Now what does that mean? So for the Mechaber's words, it's mashma maflit umavliya. Some say it's not maflit umavliya ke'echos. What does ke'echos mean, or ke'echod? It means at the same time, if you have two pieces, one iser and heter, in hot liquid, okay, does Kli Sheni have the strength to do both two actions, be maflit and be boileya, from the iser into the heter? That you need two actions for that. Or do you say it only has the koyach to do one or the other? To be maflit, if it's an iser into a liquid, it's being maflit into the liquid, right? Or if it's a heter coming down into a roitev, which is iser, it's being boileya in a Kli Sheni. It appears that there are more poskim that would agree that one action a Kli Sheni may be capable of doing, and that's where you have the iser of klipa.
If you don't mind spending a little more time on that point, I'll stand it a little
right,
bit.
Yeah.
Here's what, to begin with, I find it a little confusing.
Sure.
To begin with. I have a pot, I have an isser in it and in it.
Right.
A piece of meat, or whatever.
Right.
Now, the pot is heating both of these pieces of meat
together.
out.
Sure.
Right. We have a principle that we've had before, I wonder whether it still applies here
Sure.
at this point. That something that is emitting, that thing itself cannot simultaneously absorb. While it is busy emitting,
right.
So its act of emitting will prevent it from absorbing. After it's done emitting, it'll start absorbing.
If it is emitting something.
If it's emitting something.
Right.
Now, I have a heter and an isser here.
Right.
I don't have a problem if the isser is absorber.
No.
Why should I have a problem?
Sure.
So, my only problem is, my concern is that
right.
the isser will be releasing its own juice.
And be mavliya.
Was it releasing?
Right.
Now, so I have to say that the heter now is absorbing what
that's
the isser
correct.
is. My question is, why would the same pot, with respect to of meat,
right.
one which happens to be an isser, one which happens to be a heter, accomplish that the isser is going to be emitting and the heter is going to be absorbing? Why don't we say if the isser is emitting, then the heter probably is also emitting?
Yeah.
They're both pieces, it's the same heat.
Right.
And they won't start absorbing until they finish, both of them finish. So it must be here that the concern is a pure halachic concern, and it's not something that is dependent on the particular process that is occurring in reality right now. Because I'm not going to go around and try to identify.
No, we cannot. You're right. As we will soon see, I'll speak a little bit about that more at length concerning another issue about kafela. We're never sure. We're never sure 100% of what is really happening in that pot. But it can possibly be boileya. Right. In other words, if you hold Kli Sheni has a koach, that koach can be for either or for either this or for that. And it could be that the iser is poilet, and it just could be that the heter is boileya.
But since now I'm not going to go around measuring and trying to figure out is now the heter emitting or is the heter being boileya, since I don't know, and it's a purely halachic concern.
It is. That's correct.
Given that is the case, I wonder how you decide the question that you... Because I'm not going to go in the pot now and start measuring in order to determine the question that you've raised.
Right.
Namely, in a cliche...
No, we're not going to measure.
Right. So does it go by the authority of who holds an opinion?
No, it has nothing to do. It is a concern that it's very possible. The possibility exists that there will be blias.
So the halacha, do I have to take that into consideration or not?
Just like in Bishul. I mean, in Bishul, it's a fact. It does happen.
It can happen.
Okay, your cloud, the cloud that you mentioned of something that is emitting cannot be boiled at the same time, is something else. It has to do with something by itself.
I'm just saying,
Okay.
not. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
But why would one piece of meat be emitting under the same
No,
circumstances?
it could. No, it could be.
You don't know which.
So I'm not going to make.
No. It could be that they're both.
It could be.
They're both being boleh and maflit each other. In real bishul, that's what happens.
So since I don't know what's going on in that pot, this is purely a.
No, I have to assume.
It's an assumption.
It is an assumption that if there's a certain degree of heat there, it is very possible that the isur will be poilet. That's what I want to know.
Right. So
and the heter will be boleh, which is what I want to know. I don't care if the heter is poilet or not, and I don't care if the isur is boleh.
Right.
So I'm just going to choose the ones that are concerned.
Right. So that's and we're making an assumption.
Right.
Now so what we're asking now is, do we make that same assumption in the case of a klisheni?
Right.
That's
the question. That's the question.
How do you answer such a question?
Right. What do you mean? How do you answer?
Based on what do you answer whether we do make such an assumption or not? I mean, I'm not going to determine.
No. Again, klisheni is not mevashel. It's a question, right? It's a valid question, but we paskin that it's not mevashel.
Right.
But there are opinions that hold that, you know what, even though it's not mevashel,
right,
it does still have some strength for isurim, for hilchas taruvas. It may make a difference, especially if it's hot. Like I told you, what if it's very, very hot? So some say, you know what, it will have, or it may have, the ability to reach out to a klipa. Okay? So some say klisheni has a koach to do both, mavliya and maflit. Some say no, it can only do one. Therefore, since it can only do one,
if you have maflit, it's not going to be mavliya.
No. In other words, if you have, when do you have the situation of maflit and mavliya? When you have two pieces being in a klisheni.
Right.
So it could be maflit from the isser, or it can be boileya. It can't do both.
Right.
So if a klisheni cannot do both, it wouldn't be a problem. If the two, when will it be a problem? When I don't need two actions, I only need one. When do I need one action? Isser in liquid heter. So the liquid heter will be boileya. All that is required is one action. Or heter in isser liquid.
Right.
All it needs
is to be boileya.
Right. So either I need plita or I need bliya. That's okay. But if I need two, a lot of achronim will say no. Klisheni doesn't have the power to do both. It could do one or the other.
So does everyone agree that in a liquid that I would then in a liquid klisheni I will also have the problem of I have to throw out the taaruvot if I don't have 16?
Yeah.
According to what you
said.
said.
Sure, of course. Yes.
So
yes, definitely.
If
you hold it,
I have to throw out.
But you would need against the klipa, not against the whole thing.
Oh, just the klipa.
Just the klipa. Okay. Because we hold the klisheni is not mefashel.
But wait a second. But with respect to a gush isser that fell into a liquid heter,
right?
So there, the klipa, there is no klipa. I mean, it all
we'll get to that.
Is it like basar b'chalav?
Yes, we'll get to that. Remember the basar b'chalav? Yeah. What do you do if you cooked without taking off a klipa?
Right,
we'll talk about that soon. Yeah, that's a good question. Whether if it's a liquid, whether it's a solid that you have to remove the klipa.
So bottom line is, so we have now different opinions regarding. If we only have a mavliya, or if we have an isser in a heter liquid, or a heter in a isser liquid, we have different opinions now.
Right.
So if such a thing should occur, by whose opinion do we go?
We paskin.
Can we eat the taaruvot?
Yes, you can. Yeah. We'll hold the klisheni is not mevashel.
So bottom line, we hold it's not.
We hold it's not mevashel, and especially.
But we don't hold by these opinions.
Yeah. The mechaber says clear b'di evet muter b'leklipel b'docha be'al masach.
And the taz and the shach and no one.
No, not everybody. The mechaber says. Sure.
But we don't necessarily go by the mechaber.
Right. Yeah, but here there are at least the mechaber there are more in agreement with.
Which quite often seems to provoke the taz and shach to set them even
They
more.
do. Yeah, they're not everybody's happy with this halacha, but at least we know that if there is a big concern, there's a big hefset or whatever, you can rely on the mechaber's conclusion that it's not a problem, just a docha be'almo, which is important. I mean, a klisheni, it's not a clear rishon, and if it ever happens, if it's a large amount, you can for sure. That's the halacha. Yeah. Okay, but let's go on. What the Taz adds an additional detail that if you have a combination of something hot, solid, which is in a kli shlishi, which we are concerned that it still may be, hot, and you apply the knife, now you have two reasons to aser it. Because you have something called duchka de sakin.
Right.
When you apply a knife to it, Okay, so you're having two forces here at work at the same time. The duchka, the pressure of the sakin, plus the fact that this is still a little bit hot. Then for sure, everybody would agree that even if it's in a kli shlishi, right, it would be a problem.
But by the
right?
way,
that's an additional detail.
In Hilchos Shabbos, we did not, I think we went with the opinion that we did when we were learning. Kli shlishi just to be a klisheni, not beyond.
No, not really. Beyond klisheni, there's no problem in Hilchos Shabbos, for sure not.
But in those cases where klishi would be a required kula,
yes,
I think we went opinion that there's no extra din of a klishi. If you look in the, the 600,
but I don't understand what difference. Is something bishul or not? So klisheni is a question. If it's a question,
in those cases when there's a question, there are some that say so. You can use a kli shlishi. And
exactly.
Say kli shlishi is not going to help you because kli is also only a klisheni, and a klisheni we just said it's a problem.
Yeah, but we don't hold like that. We hold basically, even if klisheni is a problem, according to some, kli shlishi is not. That's all. I mean, it's very simple. The only time it makes a difference is with a dover gush. That's all. That's what the Achronim seem to be explaining here, at least in Hilchos Shabbos. I'm assuming is the same thing. Yeah. All right. Now, so far, what have we learned? Hot into hot, solid into liquid, liquid into solid, two solids in the liquid. It's a problem. It's also in a kli rishon that was removed from the fire, because kli rishon that was removed from the fire still continues to be hot. As long as it's yatzeledus boy. Kli rishon that you remove from the fire that is not yatzeledus boy is not a problem. Now, what happens if hot falls into cold?
Hot falls into cold?
Right.
So
right, that's what we're going to be learning now. Right. So that's what we're going to be learning now.
Because Abaya says.
All right. So maybe we'll read it inside and then we'll go into explaining it. Sif Gimel. So nofal isur cham letoch heter cham de kli rishon, or afilu isur tzoyne letoch heter cham, akol also. He's explaining, the Chaber is explaining the din of Tator Govar. If you have not a real mixture, but you have something falling into another, hot falling into hot, of a kli rishon, or even a cold falling into hot. A kol osur, because of the din of Tator Govar. Tator Govar ala elyon, umechamemoy at shemafli patachtoin. The one that's in the bottom is stronger than the one that's on top. It warms him up until it emits into the tachton. So far, so good. I mean, these things make sense. The chidush here, this halacha, is that even though it's not being cooked necessarily, the one that's in the bottom is hot, and that's going to make a big difference. Why? Because even though the one in the bottom is not necessarily the isser, it is the more powerful of the two. When you have one in the bottom and one in the top, the one in the bottom is stronger. There's different shatim as to what is actually happening in Tator Govar. The simple way of understanding is the one that is there first, in first position, first place, is stronger than the one that comes afterwards. And somehow, some even say that the heat rises. Whatever is in the bottom, somehow, especially if it's hot, it rises. Either way, regardless, the fact that something is in the bottom has more koach, more strength than the one that comes and sits on it from the top. Where does it make a difference? It makes a difference if the bottom is hot and the top one is cold, right?
Vice versa.
Yeah, but we haven't gotten to that vice versa yet, that the bottom is cold and the one, right? All the Mechaber says is if you have hot falling into hot, which we know, or cold falling into hot, especially if the one that's hot in the bottom is an Isser. And it assers the whole thing. Here we're not talking about klipa anymore, we're talking about it assers the whole thing, and because we're talking about the heat of a kli rishon. So far, so good. So if the heat of a kli rishon is there, and there's no cooking involved, you have a slice of cheese being put, by mistake of course, on a piece of meat, a hamburger.
At McDonald's, it's
yeah, that's not right. Yeah, and by the way, this is a gush too, right?
It's also not a ham. Well, it is.
Yeah, it's a solid piece of meat, so it's not even there's no din of klisheni here, perhaps. It's a heat of a kli rishon. It will make that cheese aser, and it will make the meat aser. It works both ways. In Tator Gava, what we're saying, if the two of them are heter, is, in this case, a basar b'cholov, they will both be asur. But if the meat, or if the iser was the hot one, and the heter was the cold, regardless, then the cold would become asur. The heter would become asur. All right. Right?
Excuse me, just I don't
yes.
recall. Now, if the meat, it comes from a tahor animal,
right?
It's an iser its own right.
Okay.
Do we also say hanan in such a? Because hanan always says it's because this is permitted and that is permitted. When they come together, it becomes hanan. But here we had an iser and a
right. So what's the question? I mean,
well, they always say, why does it become hanan by Basar b'chalav? According to the Ramah, it always becomes.
If it's a behemoth tahara, you would have.
Tahara,
sure.
but they say because you had now an iser and a heter, and a heter came together.
Oh, I see.
So that makes it. But if it's a heter and an iser that come together, not.
Then it would be like shari surim. You're saying.
Right.
Yeah. It
So
would be like shari surim. Do we say hanan by shari surim or not?
So
yeah. Because remember, even basar b'cholov by itself becomes shari surim after they're together.
That's a machlok.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah.
Some say that
you're right. Yeah, they continue. Right. So in this case, in your example, yes. So now comes the interesting part. But what happens, because we learned that the concept of tator gover means that the one that's in the bottom is stronger than the one that's on top. Avalima elyon cham, if the one that's on top is had vatachton tzoinen, the one that's in the bottom is cold. Eino oiser elo kedei klipo, afilu ima elyon cham is. I don't care that the one that's cham on the top is an iser, is the iser. The fact that it's on top and not at the bottom makes a big difference here. And the one that's in the bottom, the cold one, will cool it off, or will remove some of the heat, some of the strength of the iser, and it will only be an iser of a klipa. Why the klipa? Because as the tator is being goiver on the top is sinking its teeth. Kedei klipa. In other words, it manages to sink in a klipa, but the tator was still overpowering. Now, what's interesting is that the mechaber, the Ramah, nobody mentions this amounts.
Yeah.
What if I have tons? Nobody talks about amounts, not even the Gemara.
Right.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit. Yeah, so that's what we need to talk a little bit about. But the concept is clear. Tator govar is stronger than the one that's on top, even though that's a machlokes in the Gemara. Okay, that's the machlokes in the Gemara between Rav and Shmuel. Which one is stronger, the one on top or the one on the bottom? But anyway, we hold that the bottom one is stronger. And if the Isra was on top, right, and the bottom one was cold, not hot, right, then there would be at least a klipa. Okay, so far so good. Maybe we'll read the Ramah. Koze lomar elo b'choim klei rishon, of course. Kigoim miyad sheisiro min ha'esh menicho im ha'heter. Put it right away after he removed from the fire with the heter. Aval im kvar munach b'kli sheni. If it's already in a kli sheni, v'achar kach maniach ha'heter etzloi or olav eino oser klal the kli sheni eino oiser. So if once you're dealing with a kli sheni, this wouldn't apply because kli sheni eino oiser. Kemoshin is barred. If you put them next to each other, if they're both hot from a kli rishon, they're both asur. That's the way the Ramah holds. Sitting next to each other, they're both hot, they're both asur. If one of them is cold, the other one is hot, the heter needs a klipa. The place where he touched. All right. Before we go to the second part of the Ramah, let's just review what he said. That in this situation where the cold is at the bottom, even though the Isser is on top, the Isser, being the hot one, does not have the koyach to go beyond the klipa. Because of the way it works, whatever is in the bottom is stronger. Now, the question really is, wait a minute, tator govar, the one on top is govar, how much is it gover, how much is it oiser? Why don't we just really ask a kafela? Same thing with kavush. Same thing with, remember, in begidin benoisim tam. There are various sugyas in Shas, various sugyas in Hilchos Taaruvot, and which actually we brought up last time, this question. Why don't we just somehow resolve this with a kafela? See if there is a taste or there's no taste. Kavush, is it kemovusho or lo kemovusho? Let's figure it out once and for all. Let's examine. Let's try it out. Now, as far as the halacha is concerned, you can always say, not whether kavush is mevushal or not. In general, a situation arises, you can of course always easily say, well, it's talking about when there's no kafela. But in Nochiname, if you had a kafela, in various situations, you would be able to consult with him. And
even though previously we don't use it.
No, of course, we don't use a kafela. The Ramah says we don't use a kafela, but me'ikar hadin, it could be that this is where there's no kafela. And that's how the Pri Megadim, I have here, I wrote down the Pri Megadim holds like that, crazy place. It has a whole shtickle, a whole commentary about this. And Ochel Shulchan makes a distinction that the kafela can be mekel, it cannot be machmir against the din of the Taaruvot. But at least they all agree that the kafela can have something to say about these situations. The Chazon Ish is very interesting. There is a Chazon Ish that says that all of these machloikes of the Taaruvot or not, or the din kovush, if it's kovush kevush or not, has to do with whether you hold a tam kolush has a din of tam. Because it appears to be that there is a tam. Something is transferred. Something does happen. Something is absorbed. Din of kovush, the din of tatar cover. The question is if that tam kolush has a din of tam or not. And that's where the tam. That's where it's to be the machlokes. And maybe a kafela cannot really help you with that.
Is he asking to just
yeah.
Does he mean asking? Does a tam kolush have the dikr?
Yes.
Is that what he's
saying?
Yes. So is a tam kolush, which is a very, it's still strong enough to be to be the messenger of an ikr.
Right. Exactly. So that's an aside. I thought that was very interesting. That appears to be the common denominator or the main nekuda, or whether there's a machlokes between the various shittas in the Gemara. As far as why we don't resolve these issues with a kafela, is very simple, because of what you said last time. You remember what you said last time?
I remember what about a kafela last time, and that was if you're going to tell me that's even something that doesn't have a taste, like the Shach wanted to say, is going to usher, it will, even if it doesn't have a taste.
No, that was something else.
So then what's the whole din of?
Yeah. No, there is a din of kafela, at least shiurim. There was once the Chachamim gave us a shiur, then a kafela can for sure help us. But to resolve the shittas, to resolve the halacha of yes or no, we don't use a kafela for the following reason, which you mentioned. What's the din of a piece of nevela that falls into a pot? And there was shishim keneged. And then that same piece fell into another pot. What's the din?
We don't know whether it would really...
It also, in that second pot, you also need 60 times as much. Why? Because you don't know how much time was emitted. We're just being machmir.
But if it falls twice into the same pot, you only need...
Exactly, that's a separate din.
But that sounds like a paradox.
Right.
It requires an explanation.
So you see, what's the problem here? We have a concern, a halachic concern, that the Chachamim, of course, were machmir, that we don't know when it comes to blias and plitas and tam, we don't know exactly what will happen. We never know accurately what will happen. Remember with kavush, we also covered that concept that some things have kavush, some things kavush doesn't work immediately. There's so many unknowns. So we cannot use a kafela for that.
Because we don't know. But
the circumstances can be very different every single time.
But with the kafela, the problem...
So to resolve the halacha, I'm saying to resolve the halacha, you can't use a kafela.
But the kafela, in the kafela, the problem would be if it didn't spread evenly.
That's correct.
Because if it didn't spread evenly, then the taste might be concentrated at one point, and he's tasting from the other edge of the where the taste didn't spread.
Right.
But isn't the whole din of a shear of seed based on the presumption that it does spread? Because in those cases where we know that it for sure doesn't spread evenly, we
just know that by the point you reach 60, it's not even an issue.
I'm just saying, but if it didn't spread evenly, it's not going to help that it's 60. What do I care how much is
but
in a place
60,
where the taste didn't
60
go?
for sure will help.
No, even if it didn't spread there. If it didn't go that far. If the taste remained all of it around the ear and never went any further.
Right, but if I have 60
over there, it's not going to help me that the taste is concentrated here.
What do you mean here? It's all in one big pot.
But it has to spread even in that pot.
Yeah, but it's all, a pot is mixed.
But I'm saying, in the 60, the presumption is it spreads.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
because in those cases where I know it doesn't spread, let's say in the meat that has cracks.
Right, okay, I see what you're saying. Yes.
So in those cases where I know that it doesn't spread, it doesn't help me that it's 60.
Yes. Okay.
So I have to make the presumption.
Yes.
So in order for the shear to work, I have to make the presumption it does spread.
It does spread even.
But if I'm making that presumption regarding the shear, why don't I make the same presumption regarding the kfela? That's what I don't add.
What presumption?
The presumption regarding the shear. In order for 60 to help, I have to make a presumption that the taste spreads evenly.
That's correct.
Okay, why can't I use a kfela?
Yes.
So the Badei Shulchan brings us an argument
Right.
that maybe the taste didn't spread even. The kfela will try it on one edge where the taste didn't even go. So we'll say, I don't taste anything. But the taste actually went into the other edge where the taste is very noticeable.
But that's not the reason why we don't use a kefela.
Why then?
The Ramah has nothing to do with that. Badei Shulchan is his own.
You're talking about the Ramah.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Ramah. The Ramah has nothing to do. That Badei Shulchan.
Because you don't trust him.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with what the Badei Shulchan says.
Uh-huh.
That's his idea of what
Okay. No, he brings that one too.
Yeah. But the Ramah doesn't say that. The Ramah is simple.
No, the Ramah says something else. So
Yeah.
we don't trust him.
Right. Anyway, the next question is, okay, so far so good.
And the Rabbi Elyahu Kin, just an aside, on that says something interesting. He says, why don't we trust him?
Right.
Because people want to please. So he will want to tell us whatever he thinks we hear.
That's true. Sometimes that may be one possibility. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on. But what about amounts? So the Aruch HaShulchan says, amounts? We're talking about equal amounts. The Aruch HaShulchan says, we must be talking about equal amount.
Right.
He says,
it doesn't.
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. If you have lots of hot liquid coming down on a little bit of cold liquid, just because the cold is the bottom, it's going to win, it's going to cool off the hot.
Right.
No, he says it's going to be a problem. It's going to be mevashel, the cold. Same thing if you have a lot of cold coming down on a little bit of hot. It's going to overpower. So the Aruch HaShulchan says very simple. We're talking about similar quantities. Yeah, that's what he says. Right. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Yeah. But if you look at the rest of the poskim and from learning the Gemara, we don't see a distinction. And therefore not everybody agrees with the Aruch HaShulchan, or not everybody would go along with that. And they would say as follows, that the din of Tato Gova will always apply. Enochiname, you may say, well, you have to be extra careful. If you only have a little bit of an amount, right? It may be more of an issue, but the din of Tato Gova will always apply. And this makes a difference in Kalim. It makes a difference in various situations of how much really becomes Asur. Why? Because the question is not really whether one can warm up or cool off the one that's on top. That's not really the question. The real question is blias and plitas. That's what we're concerned with. And since the question all along is only blias and plitas, what the din of Tatar Gover teaches is the fact that the hot is coming down on the cold. In Ochiname, the cold is not as much as the hot. Nonetheless, because it's coming down and it's not sitting, it does not have the same koach as it would have had it been sitting.
Which is completely counterintuitive. Because if our problem is...
In other words, what they're saying, the way they explain the concept, the ones who don't agree with the Aruch HaShulchan, is that Tator Gover means blias plitas.
Right.
Forget about the physics here of can it warm up, can it cool off.
In proportion.
In proportion, right. Forget about that. That's not our concern. How much it will and how much it cannot. The question is, can there be a blia or a plita? That's our concern. Therefore, the fact that something is at the bottom means that it has some strength, and it will be boileya, and it will or be poilet because of the fact that it's sitting at the bottom. So if you have hot coming down and cold a lot, or cold coming down, a lot of cold coming down and hot, because of the nature of the tatoa gova that is at the bottom, there will be a blia or a plita. In other words, don't tell me that nothing will happen at all just because there's so much cold coming down on the hot, or so much hot. Now, obviously, if we're talking about drops, if we're talking about, that's minuscule. And it's hard to measure, right? But if you have a considerable amount at the bottom, but you have a lot more on top, there will still be a blia and a plita because the one in the bottom, being hot, has a koach of tatoa gover. Did you understand that? In other words, yes, it's true that the one on top is so much more than the one on the bottom, but because this hot stuff, and it's clear rishon, is at the bottom, it will still be boileya, or will still be poilet, into what's coming down. You may have another issue. You may have bottle You say you have so much, it may be butter completely, but you still have a blia. Because of the nature of how the Taaruvot works. That's the way they explain. Those who don't want to follow the sheet of the derech of the Aruch HaShulchan. There will still be a blia or plita. But
one is coming down and something else is the bottom at rest. Do you think that the one coming is going to force it brings with it into the bottom one because of the pressure of coming? Or would you think that the one at the bottom that is at rest will force what it contains, the one that's falling down?
Well, that's what they seem to be saying, that the one that's in the bottom somehow forces itself. It has more cloth than the one that's coming down.
Really?
Yeah. That's what they say. However, there is a distinction. I found a very interesting distinction in Achronim between something is being poured called kiluach. Kiluach that stopped versus kiluach that did not stop.
Oh, that was interrupted.
Yes, a kiluach that's coming down, you're pouring something, versus a kiluach pouring or a flow that has stopped. Boom, boom. Right? It was removed.
When the source where it's coming from is hot.
Yes. If it's removed after it poured and you removed it, or if it's continuously pouring down, there appears to be a difference. But anyway, lemaisa. We do have Aruch HaShulchan, we do have others. What do we hold? The Taz, and this is, by the way, a Taz and a Primigodim and a Mogen Avram in Hilchos Shabbos, not here. But you can apply it to here. They hold that if the heat, the one that's hot, is greater than if there's more of it than the bottom cold, then it's still usher. Completely usher. Even though the cold is the bottom and the hot is in the top, if there's a lot more than it, it's usher.
Basically, Taaruvot is portions are approximately 1 to 1.
No, but they hold it only in that case, okay? Where the hot is on top is more than the cold in the bottom. Primigodim adds.
So in other words, they say if the hot on the bottom, if the cold on the bottom is more than the hot on the top, it's not going to. No. What would they think? They don't have any other thing to say.
Cold on top and a little bit of hot in the bottom.
Yeah.
They didn't discuss that. Exactly. They discussed the other one, that if it would be hot on top coming down and a little bit of cold, it would still be also the whole thing. The Primigodim is the one that adds that if the bottom is cold and the top, let me see if I wrote it down here. If the bottom is cold and more than the hot on top, then you don't even need a klipa.
So you won't do klipa.
Yeah. Right? No, you wouldn't even need a klipa. That's what he says. In other words, since the bottom is cold and it's more than the top, then there shouldn't be even a problem. Even though this one is hot and this one is cold, but he holds that you won't even need a klipa. Okay. Anyway, as far as flow, it's a very important halacha actually. Maybe we'll make a comment about it. Flow. There is a big discussion about flow in Tuma and in Kashrus, and it's called nitzuk. In other words, as you're pouring something from the top to the bottom, there's a certain connection that is being formed.
So what's over,
whatever is in the pot can become usher because of or tameh. And in Tuma we say that. But in kashrus we don't say. We pass on that nitzuk is not chib in kashrus. But it's going to make a difference here in the halacha and the Ramah. So, and that's where some make a distinction between nifsek hakiluach, lo nifsek hakiluach. If it was interrupted or not, whether it makes a difference. But in general, we hold that we're not machmir in nitzuk for risurim purposes. Okay, let's go on. What happens in the following example? Let's say you had food cooking in a pot, and you empty the food. The pot is still hot. What's the din of the pot?
The pot is on fire.
No, it's off the fire. So the Taz brings down this example, this question. You emptied out the pot, the food is no longer there, but the pot is still hot. What kind of a thing does the pot have? It's no longer on fire. He says it's a klisheni. The Taz holds that the pot that was emptied of its content, that was cooked in it, after it's removed from the fire, has a din of a klisheni. So if you were to put something into it, the wrong things, of course, whether it's the food becoming a problem that you put into it, or the pot, it has a din of a klisheni. It's no longer a kli. There's no plitas. Chavatas brings down the same thing. The Shach apparently doesn't agree. The Shach holds that any kli that was emptied still retains its status of a Klishin lechumra.
Until it's temperature.
Yeah. And I think the Shach is the one that holds that even if it's a Kli Shlishi or Revi, if it's still Yatzei Ledesboy, very, very much, it's still, maybe the Chassam Sofer is Machmer, not the Shach. Chassam Sofer says something about a Kli Shlishi, if it's still very, very hot, it still retains its original status. Yeah.
How does that work in Shlishi?
At least about Blias and Plitas. In other words, it may not be Bishul, but it would be a problem. It would be a concern. Maybe Kedei Klipa. Yeah, we're not, the Pischei Tshuva brings down that we're not Machmer from Klishi and above. At all. So we're not Machmer like this, Chassam Sofer. But you look at the Prichodosh, you look at Chassam Sofer, they say, if it's still Yatzei Ledes boy, so what if it's a Kli Shlishi? At least that they may say that there would be some Bli or some Plita, at least a Klipper. But we're not Machmer. Okay, just a couple more points. The Ramah continues on to say, Isur sheinichu bekli heter or lehefech amrinu begam kendin tato agova kemo bebeis chatichos. In other words, the question is, do we say tato agova by kelim? The pot is hot. You put a heter into the pot that is an isur, or the isur is into a pot that is a heter. You follow? Mm-hmm. And the pot is hot. As we just said before, there's a question in the Taz and Shach about what the status of this pot is. So, which is interesting. Maybe we can relate it to this. Maybe they would somehow tie in with this Ramah, but it's a separate question. It's a separate halacha. Do we say bichlal tato gova by kelim? And the answer is yes. The Ramah and others say we do say tato gova by kelim. So technically, if you have food, Isser food that you put into a heter keli that is very hot, then it would be maflit, or the pot would be boleya a kedei klipa. We don't say more than that, even though some would say more. We hold that it's not more than a klipa. Even though usually when you say tato gova and the bottom is hot, it's asers the whole thing. By keli we say klipa.
Because it's
and the other way around too. If you have heter being placed a isur keli, it would be boleya a kedei klipa, not more than that. So that's based on what the Ramos says, the gabedin tato gova by kelim.
So in other words, for the blia to need a real fire.
Yeah. Yes,
the heat
exactly.
Transported by the food.
Right.
It's
not strong enough. Chavazdas explains that only the mokum negias a keli is nesa, not the entire keli. Let's say you put a spoon, by mistake, you're putting it, there's no liquid, it's not on the fire. You put a spoon, which is a keli, right, on top of food.
That's hot.
That's hot. So he holds only the mokum negias a keli, the way touched, it will become asur, not the whole thing. And this is similar to chamik tzosochem. Well, not exactly chamik tzosochem kula. In the case of basar b'cholov, where not the whole spoon was inside. Half of the spoon was sticking out.
In the case of
a metal spoon, sure. Right. Some say the whole kli is also. Now, even though there's an interesting halacha, by the way, that when a part of a keli becomes asur, a part, let's say a klipa, or let's say a portion of the kli, you still have to be machshir the whole kli. You don't say, okay, I'm just going to be machshir that corner. We always say you have to be machshir the whole kli. Nonetheless, here it makes a difference, because if we hold that only that spot becomes asur, it's necessary for us to know that, because if we ever need shishim, we need shishim only against that spot. Right. Okay. So even though in ochiname I would have to make the whole keli kosher, but it makes a difference in nafkamina if it ever becomes an issue later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is that in a b'di'abat case, but consequences would be...
Right, yeah.
B'di'abat case, if something was cooked, then you would need that amount.
Yeah. And I saw that with Rabbi Kiva Eger also, I think the Chavas Das too, they also hold that the keli on the food, or the food on the keli, because of the din of tatar gova, even though tatar gova usually means the whole thing is asur, on top, if that's the heter, in this case of keli on food, or food on keli, we don't see that either two becomes completely. It's only kedei klip, I believe. I guess because of the nature of the keli, that there's no liquid. in between them. It's not a real bishul, so you don't have a complete transmission here of.
It takes heat.
Yeah, a lot more heat.
To cause a keli to absorb.
Right, and we're not talking. Remember, we're not talking about here klirishin ala eish. We're talking about removed. So therefore, there's not enough heat to transmit all that. So not the whole thing will not become also just a klipa.
With respect to summarize, so if that is cold falls on the that's not on the fire.
Yeah.
That is, but it is hot.
Right.
Are we now saying that the kli blipa?
Yes.
No. So an issur that is hot fell on a kli off the fire. I'm sorry. I'm saying now the following case. An issur that is hot fell on a kli that's cold off the fire. Or not.
It still says mavliya.
So that would be the same thing, like if it was a food.
Exactly.
So it would be
very good point, because in other words, even though we say tatog over, we were assuming that the bottom one is hot, even the other way it works, because we remember we're saying tatog over, yes, but
kedei klipa, even though it's a kli.
There's a kedei klipa, even if it's a kli.
So regardless, which one of the two is hot,
that's right.
We're going to say kedei klipa.
That's right. That's a good point.
So the
apparently,
if the top one is hot, we're being machmir kedei klipa,
which we always usually are.
If the bottom one is hot, if the kli is hot,
the most it would be is a klipa.
Right. So if the bottom one is hot.
Yeah. But actually, I should say something else. I'm sorry. Okay. If we're talking about food being in the bottom.
No, food falling into.
No. But food being in the bottom, and then you have a kli
falling onto the food,
falling on top. The chiluk that was made, the distinction that was made, is only, at least the Chavazas, that what asers is only the portion of the kli that's in the food, that's touching the food. That was not so much an issue of klipa. He didn't talk about klipa there. Okay, he was more concerned about the portion of the spoon coming in. Okay, so even though it's kli, the part of the spoon or whatever it is that would become aser is only the part that went in, but it's not only kedei klipa; it would be the whole thing apparently, according to at least the Chavas Das. If the food was in yes, because he was the one that made a comment about only the.
Now who's hot in our case? Food is in the bottom.
The food is at the bottom.
But which one is hot? Food or the spoon?
The food.
So we have who is now going to be usher, the spoon or the food?
Both.
Both completely.
Yeah, both complete.
Okay.
No, but both according to the shear of how much. In other words, the kli will become usher on the amount of the.
But not only kedei klipa.
But not only kedei klipa.
It'll be through and through it.
Right. He doesn't say that. It's just kedei klipa.
And the will be usher.
You would need a shear connected that part. Yeah. But that's the Chavas Das, not Rabbi Kiva.
I'm not understanding the Chavas Das states.
Yeah. Chavas Das was only concerned about, he's saying, you know what? Don't answer the entire keli that is sitting on the
bottom.
On the food.
That is coming down.
Yeah, it's sitting.
So the keli is coming down.
Only the part that's touching the food.
What do you think?
It doesn't answer the whole keli.
Things.
Right.
The keli is coming down.
Right.
Which one of the two is hot?
The food.
The food is hot, and which one is the issur? Doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't make a difference.
Right.
So if one of the two is usher and the food on the bottom.
In his example, it was the food that was a issur because you were answering the keli. Still, he said you don't answer the whole keli just because of that. Right. And this could be a basar b'chalav situation too.
But you're even though you're not answering the whole keli,
right?
But that location that touched the food, you're answering through the whole thickness.
Apparently, yes. I think that I'm almost sure that was the Chavas Das.
That's
the only concern he had was how much of the keli was also, but it was all. It was not klipa. The one who says that there's only a klipa involved is Rabbi Kiva Eger. I believe. Let me see here. Actually, Rabbi Kiva Eger and Chavas Das talk about the klipa. Let me see if that was. Let me see here. It could be. He could be. You know what? It could be that he does say that it's only a kedei klipa because he says maybe two things. He says that only the mokum akli, and then because he does mention something about a klipa, it could be that he holds like Rabbi Kiva Eger holds that not the whole kli becomes. Let me see here. Let me see if I. I'm going to double check on that.
Okay.
I'm going to double check on that, but that's what I recall. I know Rabbi Kiva Eger and the Chavas Das were more into how much becomes aser, not in other words of the keli, as opposed to if it's a klipa or if it's the whole thing. What is that?
You can't.
No.
Correct.
Right.
But if it touches something else, how much do you need against how much do you need to see? The whole spoon or only the part that touched the? That's where it makes the difference. If that same spoon without being kosher touches another, do you now need to see against the whole spoon, or do you against the part of the spoon that touched the isser?
Yeah, but I'm almost sure, if I recall correctly, that it was only a klipa in that situation.
A klipa and that location.
In that location, which is a separate
So
thing. But I'll double check again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll double check again. Okay, one more halacha here. We spoke earlier about the fact that it could happen that an isser fell in and it was immediately removed. And since, even though it was immediately removed, it could be that it was already poiled, and therefore it became also right away. Even though some say that it's okay if you remove that, we don't hold like that. But I saw a primegodim that brings down that there's a small chiluk that could be helpful. If the chaticha fell into something tzolul, regardless of whether it's a heter or the isser, if we're talking about a solid falling into a liquid, everything is also right away. Also meaning the solid becomes also if it's a heter, or the liquid becomes also if it's the heter. We're talking about heat here, right? So even though it was removed right away, it has immediately become also if that's the scenario of solid in solul.
Either eat one of them, both of them.
Yeah, no. We're talking about here kli rishon. So in other words, everything at some point momentarily became hot. But as we've mentioned before, the example of the Ramah where two things are touching each other, that he holds in shneim chomim mechoim kli rishon akol asor, that in this situation, based on this scenario where you remove them right away, in this case, the Pri Megadim, I believe, says, right? We said, Pri Megadim says it would be okay. No, Shulchan also brings it down. In other words, what we said before, that it does not help to remove it, is only if it's solid into a liquid. But if two solid things were touching each other, this is an important halacha because by Melicha you don't say that, by Tzli you don't say that. But by here, in other words, here you don't have that kind of a situation. You have a kli rishon that was removed from the fire. Oh, I just realized I shouldn't put them next to each other. It would not be osur. Whereas if you have liquid, it doesn't really help you. Right? Solid into liquid, it immediately became a problem. What about the famous question of anytime you have to take a klipa and you did not take off a klipa and you went ahead and cooked it anyway, what's the halacha? Like by cham letoich tzoinen, we set a tog over, even though the tzoinen is at the bottom, you still need a klipa. That's an example of a klipa that needs to. You did not take a klipa and you went ahead and cooked it. So there's a famous machlokes here, Rabbi Tam, in the Rivor. Rabbi Tam says no problem. He's the one that's lenient. It's in Toisus.
Liquid or
right, but from Rabbi Tam it's mashma. If you just learn the Pashup Pshat, that it's not a problem. You don't need to worry about a klipa. Just like you don't worry by cholov, by milk, because cholov is something that you cannot take off a klipa from. So since you cannot take it off, you don't worry about it. So it's like that, in the same way that by cholov you don't need one lechatchila, pretty much because you cannot remove it. So same thing, in that which you needed to remove, you did not remove, it's okay. The Rivor says no, you need shishim keneged a klipa. There are more passages like Rabbeinu Tam. Where do we know that? Not here in Taaruvot, in Basar v'cholov. Remember that? In Tzadik Aleph, that anytime the meat requires to be, klipa needs to be removed and it was not, it's muter b'di'evet. The shach is mechalek, very interesting chiluk, that the din of toises is only when you cannot recognize the isur. If it's completely bolul, yes, it fell apart, I cannot see it, I cannot remove it, fine, then I can't remove it. It's just like the milk that I can't remove. But if the piece is still there, and I have to remove the klipa, okay, it may not affect everything else, maybe not, but I still have to remove the klipa, okay? And therefore, if you don't, and you don't have a shear connected that klipa, it's going to be a problem. So the Shach says, if I can still see the isur, I still have. In other words, that's the chiluk. In other words, whenever I can't, it's like cholov, that you don't need to. But whenever I still can, I have to. And that's all in Basar v'cholov. I looked it up over there, and that's where the Makor is. Marshal Paskins like the Rivor I saw, that you also need, that even in the cholov, you will need shishim keneged the klipa. Mogen Avram is mechalek that derech klal. Interesting, Mogen Avram. Mogen Avram says yes, derech klal, wherever you need a klipa, you didn't take it off, it's osur. There's one exception where it's mutter, the klipa of the Torah Govar, because that's only a chumrah. He calls the klipa of the Torah Govar more of a chumrah than the rest of them. The rest of it is the mikar adin. And here, it's more of a chumrah. Therefore, if you didn't take off the klipa that you were supposed to by the Torah Govar, then you could be meichel. But the Torah Govar, he says, shenifsek akiluach, I think. It was not continuous. Yeah. It was not continuously pouring. Anyway, what did we say earlier as far as the din of lemaskona? We hold like the Mechaber the Ramah. I think they both are in agreement that the di'evet it's mutter, Basar b'cholav there. So it's if you didn't take it off, it's mutter. If it's a hefsa, the Kaf HaChaim brings down that if it's a hefsa meruba, you can be samech the Mechaber the Ramah. Yeah. The last halacha of the Ramah here. So we said about that there is tator gover by kelim. Isu shenichu bekli heter leefech hamiu vegam din tator gover kemo bebeis chatichos. Ayin le'ensim tzadik dalatim chotach basar besakin choyleves, which is a separate din. What happens if you cut a piece of meat with sakin choyleves? Also, laros mikli sheyesh bo shuman kosher. You cannot. It is forbidden to pour from a kli that has kosher fat into a ner doilek. Candle that is lit, sheyesh bo chelev, forbidden fats, or shuman iser, b'di'evet en lochush. So this is the case. This is the last halacha in the Ramah. Is the case of if you say that there's nitzuk is chibur or not chibur, meaning the connection in the flow. So he says lechatchila, don't do it. You have shuman going down into chelev.
But he's saying a very special case.
This is not the yeah, exactly. This is not because of the heat.
Yeah.
Right. This is not a case of where the iser is on top, but it makes no difference. Because if you nitzuk is the nitzuk.
The whole point of the nitzuk is in the bottom.
Yeah.
If the isser is on the top of you don't need it. The what's on top is the nisser anyway.
Right. No.
And what's on the bottom is being hit by what's coming down.
Yeah. In this case, it wouldn't make a difference, right? In the other case, it would. In the case where it's continuous going down, hot and cold. But here, in this case of nitzuk, you're right. The isser is at the bottom. You have kosher stuff at the top. And is this flow going to be a problem? And so he says lechatchila in the case of shuman and chelev, don't do it. But he says if you did it anyway, but the evet en lochush.
But if it wasn't, but if the candle of chelev was not lit,
it's not a problem.
Then it's not a problem.
No, it's only because of the heat.
It's lit by itself.
Yeah.
So it's giving off particles. Is he worried about the particles giving off, or is he worried about the?
He's worried about the connection, especially with the heat. When you have heat, it's the heat that makes everything rise. Right. Yeah, as we said before, the heat causes the heter here to rise. Not the heter, the iser here to rise. Yeah. And as a result of that, maybe a little bit of that will...
so you need here both. You need the nitzik and you need the
heat.
Independent heat force of
right.
the...
Yeah. But he says at the end, ein lochush if it happened anyway because of the halacha that we passed in that nitzik is not a chibur, therefore it's not a... Okay, we'll stop here and Hashem review it.
Now, were they talking about something where the shuman that's coming down was also hot, or it's only the ner?
No, it's only the ner apparently. Yeah. Well, obviously, if the shuman for it to come down, it would have to be liquid form. It could have been heat before, but it doesn't say that it's hot. It only says here that the ner is doluk, ner doilek. That's when it is a lechatchila of a problem, but you don't have to worry.